One of the many ways that you can incorporate focus on form in your classroom is something that is known as corrective feedback. Now, corrective feedback falls under the realm that is known as negative evidence, which is the opposite of positive evidence. Basically, negative evidence draws the learner's attention to some sort of problematic language during meaning-focused interaction. So it's trying to get them to correct whatever it is that has been done incorrectly, to notice those errors. So there are 3 different types of corrective feedback you can incorporate in your classroom. The first is recasting, and it's something that we're all familiar with. You kind of think of it like a parrot. So a student would say something like, "He hungry," and the teacher would say something to correct it. So the correct way to say that would be, "He is hungry." And then hopefully the student would mimic back, "Oh, he is hungry," and they're correcting that language structure. Now, some people do think that recasting is disadvantageous to students because it is simply parroting. However, I do think that it can be successful. I use it in my own classroom, and I use it only with things that they have been explicitly taught. So something that we've been working on is complete sentences. So I always ask my students to speak in complete sentences so that can transfer into their writing. So whenever they don't, at times I will recast what they have said by adding a correct beginning, and they repeat that. And the reason why I do this is because I know that they know why I'm fixing it. So I think that in that case, when they do understand why they're being recasted, that it can be effective in the classroom, and it's kind of a quick way to provide corrective feedback. Another type of corrective feedback is clarification. So basically, the student would say something and you would that's incorrect, and you would basically ask for more clarification. So the teacher would say something like, "What was that?" or "Could you repeat that?" And that would give the student an opportunity to pause, think about how they can say what they said correctly, and then repeat it in hopefully a better grammatical form. And this results in learners producing modified output, and some say that this is beneficial for learning because they are actually correcting their mistakes themselves and they're conscious of that language that they're using. Again, though, this can only be really used with something that they know to correct, or else, they can't correct it. I do use this in my own classroom. So again, with like the complete sentences, sometimes I'll say like, "Oh, could you repeat that sentence?" And my students already know, "Oh, I need to say this again, but do it complete," and they do that themselves. This is a little bit more lengthy with time, but I do think that it does allow the student to really take ownership of their learning. And then the last form of corrective feedback is metalinguistic feedback. So metalinguistic feedback consists of language-related episodes. So language-related episodes are basically just meaning-focused discourse where learners are discussing linguistic form. However, this is more spontaneous. And when you're giving that type of feedback, instead of just parroting how to do it correctly, or just asking them like, "Can you rephrase that?" It's giving more specific feedback. So if they incorrectly use the past tense of something, you would point out to them, what would the past tense of that be? Or what would that irregular conjugation be? So it's a little bit more specific. And then, just the kind of question, is one better than the other? I think it just completely depends on the class, the day, the amount of time you have, and how it is implemented. Again, these types of corrective feedbacks cannot really be implemented successfully unless the students have had practice with what it is they're being corrected. And then there's also the points of, is this something that just the teachers do, provide corrective feedback, or can the students? In my own classroom, I do have students provide corrective feedback. Not always, because You can't have students constantly interrupting each other every time they make an error. But I think that there is a time and a place where that can be done, and it can really be a great learning experience for the students because they're getting that feedback from a peer, and that peer who is providing that corrective feedback is also getting to practice that skill, and they're recognizing that it's an error. So to me, I always think with my kids, if my kids can teach something, they really understand it. And having students be in charge of that corrective feedback for certain activities puts them in the seat of a teacher where they can be successful with language.